Well, welcome and thanks for joining me for another episode of Understanding Business. This is utlradio.com, your business success and legal information station, and this is episode 182. Now, on today's show, I'm going to be speaking with Rich Gaspari, and I'm really excited. Rich Gaspari is a legend in the bodybuilding world. He has so many championship accolades that it would take half the show just to get through all of them. And in addition to being a former top pro bodybuilder, a Hall of Famer in the IFBB Hall of Fame, he's also the founder of Gaspari Nutrition, which is one of the world's leading supplement companies. And we are going to be talking to him today about his journey from competitive bodybuilder into entrepreneur and business owner. And we're going to talk to him about what lessons he's learned, what skills he's been able to translate from bodybuilding into business, and what we can learn from him on our own journey as entrepreneurs and business owners. All right, well, I've been talking about you and your career, and what I'd like to just get to, if you could speak for a few minutes about the commitment and the skills that you have sort of built up as a pro bodybuilder, and how those skills translated into your transition to an entrepreneur and a successful business owner. And, you know, some of those skills I was talking about are things like being aware of your competition the same way that you would in a bodybuilding competition, but not being fixated on them, focusing on what you can do better. So could you talk for a few minutes about some of those skills that translated from bodybuilding over to entrepreneurship?
Well, you know, as a competitive bodybuilder, you know, when I was going up against any competition, he was a totally different physique. You know, basically comparing to Arnold, you know, it was the type of guy with a, you know, very small waist and, you know, very wide structure, you know, in the shoulder, taller than me. So he had a much different type of body, where I was more of a, you know, of a Herculean physique. You know, I could build my legs much better than his. I could get much denser, much harder than him. So for me, the best way is like looking or assessing my competition is not to try to beat him because he was much bigger than me, but to beat him at what I could be the best of my attributes. So what I did basically was, you know, get in the most, you know, conditioned shape than any bodybuilder could ever get in. You know, I was the first bodybuilder to introduce, you know, striated glutes. Before that, no bodybuilder would ever show off their, you know, their glute muscles, because that was, you know, that was covered up, and, you know, that is a muscle. So I was able to first time to be able to do that, and then it shocked the bodybuilding world. Now, any top bodybuilder who's in condition, he has to show that he has striated glutes. So that was what I did. I assessed my competition and basically said, well, what are my strong attributes to be able to beat, you know, his? And, you know, and that's what I would basically do. Same thing in business. You know, when, you know, I compete with other companies, I looked at what was the best, you know, attributes that I had with, you know, Gaspari Nutrition, whether, you know, for me, it was having me as the person in charge of the company, you know, me as the, you know, the founder and the former bodybuilder who started a company that knew what, you know, other bodybuilders wanted to use and take. So I basically, you know, looked at that as my strength, and, you know, and pushed that to my, you know, audience and customers to say, like, you know, I know what you guys, you know, need and want, because I, you know, I was there, you know, and I looked at certain ingredients or products that I wanted to take. To compete with, you know, a faceless entity, you know, I'm a person that you could talk to and, you know, see me at shows, and, you know, so I got a personal rapport with my customers, which then, you know, made customers more feel comfortable in, you know, in trusting me with the products I developed. So I kind of used that to my benefit from, you know, being this, you know, businessman with my product line, and then, you know, taking what I've learned from bodybuilding to business. And that's where he came, you know, he had a liking to me to see that, you know, I had that entrepreneurial, you know, view of, like, not just feeling entitled to. And this is what other bodybuilders have to learn, is like, you know, just, you have to work for building who you are. It's not just sitting there, you know, and you can be the greatest bodybuilder and, you know, demand a certain amount of money, but you got to build yourself up and work for that. And I felt like, I could do more by getting that ad than getting those, $3,000 he was going to pay me. So he was like, you're a much smarter guy than I thought. And this was me when I was like.
Question. If you had one piece of advice for entrepreneurs today, people that are starting their own company, or they have this desire to start it, but they haven't done it yet, what would be your number one piece of information that you've learned as an entrepreneur over the years?
Well, you can't give up. You have to plan. If you don't plan, you'll fail. You have to come up with a vision, and then you have to plan what you want to do with that vision, and then you have to execute. And then a lot of times when you're executing something, it may not work, and you have to know when to let that certain thing that you want to do, or certain, product that you wanted to sell, if it wasn't going to work, go to the next one, time to not just waste your time on that specific thing that you thought would make it. Got to read the demand of the audience.
And I think that what is important to take away from what Rich was saying basically is, that you have to have a vision, and then you need to plan. You need to analyze what's working and not working. And if something's not working, you let it go and you move on to the next thing, and you don't give up. And for me, I think those bits of information were probably the most important thing that we talked about today, because that's his game plan, and that's how he runs his business. That's how he ran his professional bodybuilding career. And the fact that he acknowledged what we were saying earlier in the show about analyzing and assessing competition, but not becoming consumed by them. I think that was, exactly right on point with what I was saying at the beginning of the show.